and welcome to this Motorsport Magazine podcast in association with Mercedes-Benz.
Hey Jack, I've got new ones.
You look really grown up. Very smart, Jack.
Like your sisters.
Can I have that? Jack?
I like the way you work it, no diggity. I got to bag it up. I like the way you.
Now, with me today is Freddie Spencer and Mat Oxley, and we are going to be looking ahead to the MotoGP season, and we have a lot to discuss. There's even the last week, a lot has happened. So we've got 6 pages of questions from you, the readers, as well. So let's just get going. Let's start with who's going to win it.
You go, Freddie.
Buy some time.
Yeah, who's going to win it? You have to say, obviously, at this point, Marc looks very strong. I think not only for the fact that he's the defending champion and what he's done in tests, but I think also some of the progress they've made with the bike. They're working on the engine characteristics. And I think, too, the electronics for them, each year that goes by with the standard electronics that everybody has to run, I think is beneficial for Honda. And they just look very comfortable. And that's the thing that Marc, every year, he seems, I think, just a little more comfortable in the position he's in. And he certainly prepares very, very hard and trains very hard. And so I would have to say he's going to be tough.
Matt, you agree?
Yeah, I think Marc's definitely the strongest. Although, the last few years, what's happened in pre-season has been the complete opposite, pretty much, of what's gone on in the season itself. So, but yeah, it's a long season, 19 races, longest ever season. Anything can happen. Marc does fall off a lot. He only needs to break a collarbone or something to throw the whole thing open. He is remarkable the way he sort of prepares, not only mentally and racing wise. He prepares to crash as well. He spends so much time stretching and everything, basically makes himself so that he can. And most of the crashes these days are at front ends because you've got traction control, so they're usually low side. So if you're lucky, you'll be all right. It's not like they're getting flicked up in the air too often. But I think the thing with Marc is his adaptability, that he like Freddie was, back in 85, like Stoner and a very few other guys, Roberts, can make a motorbike, can ride around a problem, instantly, just adapt himself.
Yes,
and I don't think anybody else out there can do that. And I think that's especially important at the moment with the way the tyres are. They're quite unpredictable. So the riders are constantly being thrown new challenges. The bike setup needs to change for this tyre, blah, blah, blah. They go into the race and things aren't right. And Marc can ride around it, and everybody else is going, well, I need to use corner speed to get the lap time, and I can't because this tyre won't give me the corner speed. Marc just finds another way.
Everybody else at this point, when they get to a certain point, they seem to need to get the motorcycle to work for them. And you are dealing with a bike with an incredible amount of horsepower and the speeds that they're going. And as Matt said, the problem that, and when we get into talking about the Yamaha program, is the inconsistency of the tires. There again, that can also be a motorcycle. One of the great things when you get a motorcycle racing bike working at its best is sometimes the best is its margin of flexibility and its margin of being able to work around. As I said, Marc is at this point the best out there at doing that. I think also the bike, for him, there seems to be that. Also, if you look at what I think is very encouraging from the Honda's perspective, is you look at the other riders on the Honda. You look at Cal, and he's right there lap time wise. And his riding style, he's aggressive like Marc, absolutely. And so there's some similarity there that I think is a benefit to Marc when Cal is doing some of the testing. But I think that also shows the bike has come around too.
Is Honda the strongest package, rider-wise, because they've got Cal backing up the factory bike? that's arguably better than any of the other factories, having those three and now his teammate. That's the best package.
Well, you look at the world champion, obviously Mark. Danny won the last race. He won 2 races last year. You would expect he's going to be there. And then Cal. I think from just on the factory bikes, you would have to say those three are pretty strong.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously Honda are very strong. Yamaha are in a lot of trouble, but who knows? You know, they might just crunch those numbers and bang, solve that problem. It could happen. Ducati obviously there, but then we see Lorenzo sort of fastest in at Sepang and then 16th at Chang. So he's got one of those riding style where he needs the bike to be absolutely perfect, a bit like Max Biaggi. He's the way he rides it. He needs the setup to be absolutely 100% to his requirements. Dovizioso. I think he seems to work better with the bike from track to track than Lorenzo. But yeah, Honda are looking very strong.
Well, this is the thing too. If you look at the issue with Jorge, it's always for him that the same complaint, where the mid corner direction change seems to be his biggest problem, and obviously the type racetrack can affect that. But it's also his mindset. If he struggles, emotion, he seems to there's that connection there of because you watch him get out front, and if he gets out front and goes, and Danny was kind of like that too, where he was really tough from the very front, but it was getting in the battle, not really so much. So that's certainly, I would be concerned. And the other thing, Matt, is when Ducati came out and said right before this last test after Sebring that Jorge's going to have to take less money, and you wonder, is someone like Jorge? I mean, who knows? Thailand. There was the day before, I think the test began in Thailand, and I mean he had a horrible test. If that had something to do with his motivation, I wouldn't think so. But maybe, you never know from a support standpoint, because I think Jorge kind of needs that. That was one of the things that I think he struggled with at Yamaha. But the Yamaha, as we have seen, the sensitivity to the tire performance and the riders and their attitude and maybe how they deal with it. That's another concern. You see not only the big difference in performance from one day to the next, but also just kind of the way that it works.
Yeah, psychologically, that's an incredibly difficult thing to deal with if you're a rider. If you one day everything's perfect and you go out the next day and maybe the temperature's slightly different, so the tires are not working the same way or whatever. That can crush a lot of people. I mean, the thing is that all these people in MotoGP at the top, are amazingly psychologically strong. I think that's one of the most important things in racing that most people don't really see, and Freddie obviously having 3 world championships and everything was there doing that. But it's an incredibly fragile sort of emotional, psychological state being a racer. Everything has to be on side. And there again, Marc is one of those guys who whatever's thrown at him, he'll just go, hey, I'll make it up as I go along. And that's a very difficult thing to beat, isn't it? Whereas somebody else like Jorge needs everything to be in line.
Yeah.
And if one thing's out of line,
And I think too, that's the thing a little bit about Maverick. That may have been the difference. When Marc and Maverick came along as kids, we talked about that on one of the shows last year, where Maverick, the question wasn't his ability, but what was the difference between him and Marc? And I think that is it. Is Marc picks himself up, or he just keeps moving forward. And you're right, at the very top level in motorsports. I mean, we have to deal with the danger, you deal with the expectation, and also you're putting yourself out there every single lap, every single day, and that's part of it. And so the other things it depends on how it goes wrong with that. You get so focused on what you do that if there's and this happens with a lot of riders, and I've seen this growing up as a kid, and people that would come along that had incredible ability, but they'd get to a certain point, and that the limitation was that, where they couldn't deal with the struggling, the late on Sunday afternoon, or if things didn't go right. And it wasn't because they weren't strong, it's just all their energy went into doing what you do. And I think that's maybe where my concern would be, and that's kind of what I was getting at a while ago with Maverick, is you see him, he's really quick, but just a little bit of struggle. Over 19 races in a world championship, that, if I was Yamaha, that could be a problem.
Obviously, Lorenzo left Yamaha for Ducati to win the title with another manufacturer. A couple of people have asked whether Marc needs to do that. Does it diminish his legacy? I think that came from Deputy Dog and obviously, and also Oscar J.
I think Marc at the moment, I think his sole desire, as far as I see it, only he knows what's going on in his head, is that he wants to win as many championships as he can. And I think he wants to win 10. we all know who's won 9. I think if he wins 4 more titles, then he's won 10 world titles, and he surpasses Rossi in the total number of titles. That's my feeling, that he really wants to do that. And the only way he's going to do that, to me, really, is sticking where he is. Yeah. Because, otherwise you're going to lose a year, as we saw with Jorge. You're going to lose a year adjusting to adjusting to the bike, adjusting to the team, blah, blah, blah. So I think, to me, unless they have a falling out, I just see him keeping on where he is now until he's won 10 world titles.
I agree with that 100%. I think the other thing too is he not only win 4 more titles, get to 10, but he'll be also the most in the 500 or MotoGP category, and break Ago's record, and so I think Marc doesn't care about the fact of changing or what someone else. He's very happy where he is, and I think he'll stay.
Well, there's talk of KTM with a Red Bull sponsor. There's rumours, but
maybe
who knows?
one
maybe
day.
He gets to 10. Yeah, maybe. Once,
I think he wants to win 10 world titles.
Yeah,
I really think he does. And I think that's his main motivation at the moment. And the thing is, the Honda hasn't always been the best bike. He's been there since 2013. It hasn't always been the best bike. But what we were saying earlier, he just, he doesn't care. He'll just make it do what he needs it to do. And talking about Maverick, when it started going wrong for him last season, which was at Barcelona when it started going really wrong, and they had real trouble with the tyres. And every time he got off the bike, he walked into the garage shaking his head like that, and you just knew straight away his head's gone. You can't throw your toys out of the pram like that. You've just got to go, well, this is the problem, and we've got to work to fix it and work around it or whatever. You can't lose your cool, can you?
Yeah, and that's the thing, and certainly it's difficult. It's difficult in that moment not to get frustrated, especially if you had a different expectation, or if you feel like that something isn't being done. But the reality is that you can't let it distract you. You can't let it affect, because the only person hurt was Maverick. The bike, and that's the other thing too. When you look at what the Tech 3, what Johan has done, Zarco, and he's out there and he's running quicker than the factory guys. And in fairness to factory guys, they're trying things. There's certain things they're dealing with that can affect that 2 or 3 tenths of a second. But still, there is another Yamaha up front. So
let's stick with Yamaha. Quite a big week. Obviously, this has been recorded just ahead of the third and final test, which this week was announced that Tech 3 would leave Yamaha. And it was Tech 3 leaving Yamaha, which is, I think that's kind of a key point to make, that it wasn't Yamaha leaving Tech 3, but Tech 3 made a conscious decision to leave Yamaha. Why would they do that?
Well, I think basically they jumped before they were pushed. I mean, I think we all know that Rossi's going to want to run a MotoGP team when he retires, maybe even before he retires. Who knows? And he'll obviously be with Yamaha, and Yamaha are only going to run one satellite team. So who are they going to choose? Hervé Poncharal or Valentino Rossi? So and Poncharal said that last year, in fact, that he knew what was coming. So he obviously had to go and find an alternative, and I think he's made an excellent decision. I mean, Poncharal is a clever guy. He's in it for the right reasons, and he generally does make pretty good decisions. So I think it's the perfect way out for him.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that started the ball rolling. But I think at the end, probably the deal, we don't know what the deal is, and we assume we know where they're going. But I think that it's certainly in the long run going to be a good deal for them.
Jochen from Frozen Speed, the photographer, has said, what do you think he meant when he said his new partner offered him something which he'd been dreaming of having for many years?
Well, more of a probably factory support, but also, and if it is KTM, then the program, can be a lot more expanded. But the only place for him to say that would be support, more of an equal program, possibly.
Yeah.
I mean, Tech 3, the tradition has always basically been that they get last year's bikes.
Exactly.
Which, as we know now, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, I think he's obviously been promised to have factory updates, the same spec which is actually pretty easy to do nowadays, because they can't change engines, so it's not like you have to keep firing engine parts at somebody all year. Basically, you just build the same engines for Tech 3 and for your factory team, and away you go. So it's it's actually become a lot easier to do that than when Freddie was riding, when every week they were getting new cylinders, new pipes, new heads, new carburetors, new everything. Now basically
That is true, and I think just the fact of being on equal footing, and there's a lot of potential we see with the KTM program, and so it started out where, that he obviously, if it was a choice between Valentino and him, I was thinking that if Valentino is going to run one more year, that maybe I was possibly that they would start the MotoGP program like a year sooner.
To me, that would make sense.
It would
if he was riding for his own team to start off with, that would give it a huge, not that he really needs it, but a huge kind of sponsorship bump.
Right.
And already his team were playing around with sort of Photoshop last week and sending out pictures of a Sky VR46 with a number 46 M1. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
it would be a nice segue, and it'd be a way to end up his
Exactly.
racing career. And a little different, level as far as, because of not being completely the factor team, so they could be a little more of a send off.
But I think also that Yamaha would obviously look after him if he was going to run his own team and he was riding. But also I think this might help Yamaha, because Rossi tends to dominate the garage, and we all know that Lorenzo didn't like that. I mean, Lorenzo, I think, is much tougher psychologically than Vinales, and I think Vinales is really struggling to kind of deal with Rossi's dominance, and I think probably Yamaha are very aware of that, and that's affecting Maverick, who's their long-term future as a rider. So, maybe Rossi will go to his own team next year. I'm just speculating, and maybe Zarco, because surely they don't want to lose to Zarco, and Zarco would come into the factory team.
Yeah.
So that would be that would keep everyone happy.
It would.
Maverick would be happy, Zarco would be happy, Rossi would be happy.
Yeah, well, and like I said, just from the standpoint of thinking down the road, you and I both agree that if he's going to jump into the MotoGP program with his own team, he starts it. You're right. The sponsor would get it. It would get the exposure, and it would get it going and legitimize the program, so that everybody sees how it's run and things. And I don't know. It's probably something I would maybe, if I was in that situation, consider doing for the long-term viability of it, because the MotoGP program is different than running a Moto3 or Moto2 or But
Max, a reader's asked, did Yamaha blunder in re-signing Vinales? Should they have just taken Zarco? Who's the better one to build a team around?
I mean, I was quite surprised when Maverick did re-sign, because I know, he feels like he's living in the shadow of another rider, and is that? I mean, he knows Rossi's not going to go on forever, but actually, who knows? Yeah, I was surprised when he signed, but I think he must have had some kind of reassurance Maybe. I don't know. It's hard to know, but I was surprised that because I know he's not particularly happy with the situation as it is. And so I think he must have had some kind of a reassurance, which just goes back to what we were talking about a minute ago. Who knows?
Is he in a bad place that's going to affect this season, do you think?
Well, the only thing that's going to continue to affect this is two things. One, if they don't fix the issue, and both riders are talking about the same issues, so you can't put that completely on just what Maverick's struggling with, or Valentino. So, but what would affect it absolutely is if he keeps shaking his head coming in the garage, and because he doesn't seem to rebound as quickly, and you look at going into the last season. I mean, I said that he would get second in the championship. I really believe that after watching the race. I still thought Marc would win, but he dominated preseason testing. Went out the first few races. Thought, well, okay, he's moving along, and then he had just a couple of things. He had that run in practice with Valentino. You remember that? And you could see he can just so quickly get kind of off track. And again, I understand that as well as anybody, because again, what people, even though you're at the elite level and your focus and your ability to be able to focus and all these things are there, it is that emotional part that you got to compartmentalize, that you got to separate because of the frustration and struggles, and especially how competitive it is. Because you go from 1 week and the next week, you're just a few tenths off and you're 12th,
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, if you lose half a percent of your performance potential, yes. Basically that's half a second,
yeah,
and you're gone. You're out of there. That's 10 seconds over a race. Yeah. So if you're not operating at 100%, if you're only operating at 99.5%, that's not enough. You know what I mean? So that's a very fragile thing to kind of try and keep together, to keep your brain and your will to win and your willingness to take risks and all that kind of stuff. To keep that at 100%. Week in, week out, it's not easy. Even if you've been off on holiday, you've been somewhere really nice on holiday with your girlfriend and relaxed and got to thought, wow, this is really nice. And you come back to the next race and you've got to go back into the ring, and you're like, whoa, I'm not sure if I want to do this. So those, I think people don't understand that these people are humans, but what they're expected to do is kind of superhuman,
And that's also, you can play little tricks on yourself. One of the things that certainly when I was at my very best, and I was very fortunate because I went years and years and years, basically just continuing to improve, continuing to get the most out of my performance, and also my adaptability and all these things. And one of the things that I noticed is I had a very simple approach. And I think that's sometimes what happens too, where, someone like, who knows, Maverick last year, he goes through testing, gets on the bike, no expectation. And then I said this in one of the podcasts right after he kind of dropped off, as I said, maybe he realized he was leading the world championship, And that's the thing that I think happens a lot, is the realization of the situation that you're in. And that is, I've always said that one of the moments for me was coming out of the tunnel at the match races in 1980. I was with Dale Singleton, and we were both young, and Dale had already won Daytona. I was 18. And I mean, it's Brands Hatch. And as far as you could see, it was people, and, everybody's there, Kenny and Barry. And he said, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "Not really." I said, "This is exactly where I want to be." And that comfort level in that situation is something that you carry through as you build along, and it's obviously what makes someone like Valentino so great, is he knows exactly who he is, and that's exactly what he wants to be. And Marc's that way, and then you got warriors like Danny, who just kind of are there. And there was guys over the years, you can say Alex Barros was another one, just that they're not the most talented, but they get the most out of their performance every race, Did
we see a glimpse of that with Zarco when he crashed out of the lead last season? Was that him realizing I'm leading?
Not so. No, I don't think so. I think because that happens. It happens to, even though he's a world champion, it was, it was the big race. I think just probably a little over exuberance, but he's another rider that is very methodical in that respect. So he's able to really control his emotions, which we're going to benefit him.
Yeah, incredibly so. And the thing about Yamaha is that they've got themselves, when you get in a hole in this sport, again, you're talking about, fractions of percentages between winning and coming third, fourth. So they've been running 3-4 different chassis the last 6 months, 8 months. And when you're doing that, you're never getting to, to ride a bike fast, need to know it so intimately that you need to know what it's going to do before it does it. If you go into a corner a bit too quick, or, you make a slight mistake, or you need to know how it's going to react. And if you don't know the chassis that well, you won't know how it's going to react. And then you're not going to be able to go fast. And so they're all jumping from chassis to chassis to chassis, and they're never getting intimate enough with any of them to be able to take them to 100%. So I think that's one of their problems. They've just, and then they start asking questions that they shouldn't be asking, because actually the reason they're not going that fast is not because there's a problem, it's because they haven't, they're just jumping around too much. And whereas Zarco, bang, bang, bang. And you actually think that the chassis that he's using is a 2015. It's the chassis that Rossi and Lorenzo used in 2016. But they didn't use the 2016 chassis. So actually it was 2015, designed for Bridgestones. You know what I mean? So you go, wow, this guy, that's motorbike racing for you.
It's what he's comfortable on it. He knows, as you said, Matt, it is always about being able to push the bike to that very limit and a little bit more, and know it's going to be okay, because that's how you're able to push it that little bit more.
So in 8 months' time, we sat around this table, is Zarco the best placed Yamaha rider?
He could be. He could be.
I think he's going to be, certainly he's going to improve on, he's certainly going to improve on what he did last year, I believe. And he's going to be there every week. I
mean, looking at the runs, I think that he did at Chang, I think it was quite a short run, but I think he did the fastest run of all. It was quite a short run, but low 30s, 3 or 4 low 30s. And I don't think anybody else did that, so you go, wow. But in a way, the situation that he's in, you can kind of thank Dorna for that, because all their work over the last 8-9 years has been to try and reduce the gap between the factory bikes and the independent bikes. So with doing what he's doing now 10 years ago or 20 years ago would have been impossible. But now the bikes are all so similar and the electronics are the same, blah blah blah. An independent rider who's got a good team behind him and a good head on his shoulders, it's never been done before. A privateer win the Premier title, but it's not impossible now.
No. And the other thing you look at Jan is the fact that you can see it in the way he won both the Moto2 championships, is he gets stronger as the better he gets, and the more the better his performance is. And that's, you would think that would always be the case, but it's not. It goes back to what I was saying a while ago about someone's comfort level being in that position. And also, who knows the effort level it took. That's the other thing. That's why you see in qualifying, numerous reasons why you see in qualifying, someone, and the viewers, they watch and go, well, he qualified 5th, but he finished 12th, or he was 30 seconds back. Why is that? Because he was only a tenth slower, or even less, or is what Matt alluded to a while ago about what Johan did in the test. Is the key is the consistent race pace, which is what has benefited Valentino of these last years, what he's been so good at. And so Johan, I think that's one of his strengths, is he's a great leader. It's one of the things that has helped Jorge be so successful, is his ability to lead, his ability to get in front. And if he's confident, he just doesn't make that many mistakes, And so I think that's where, for the factory Yamaha guys that they should be concerned with you on is he's not going to. I don't think the pressure. Sure, he had that one crash, but I really think he's just going to get stronger. You know.
I was speaking to Poncharal at Sepang, and he was saying that Zarco actually gets stronger under pressure. It actually gives him a boost. And, Poncharal's been in Grand Prix racing for 30, 35 years, and he says he's never known a rider who responds as well to pressure. Actually, it actually, some riders are like that. Yeah. But
it's very few. Yeah. There's less like that than there are the other way. Sure. Don't you agree? I mean, where you see it. And as a rider, you kind of know the ones who are like that. Those are the ones that, no matter their speed that you want to race against, or just the fact that you like to know their strengths and weaknesses. Then you have some who, it's like a Kenny, obviously, or Tony Mang that I race against, that the toughest they were on Sundays, I mean, you dreaded that, in that respect. But it was also a challenge, where you knew it was going to be tough, and actually I kind of liked it,
And Zarco's other strength, which you've written about quite a few times on the website, is his ability just to ride the bike he's given. So if Tech 3 does go to KTM and he sticks with them, that's obviously going to benefit him, isn't it?
I don't think Zarco would stay with KTM with Tech 3, even if they do get factory bikes from KTM, because he wants a factory salary, and he deserves a factory salary, and there's a very significant difference between a factory salary and an independent rider salary. You're talking 10 times different. You're talking So he wants a factory ride. I mean, it's important to remember these guys. They someone like Zarco or Marc, most of them, they will prioritize the best bike first and think about the money after. And Zarco is certainly at that time, but without a doubt, he wants a factory bike, I would say.
And is it a risk for Tech 3 should they go to KTM? Because it's such a young program that the bike it's got a long way to go.
Well, the risk always in a situation like that is longevity. With Yamaha, it's 18 years, and Yamaha will be there as long as there's a MotoGP program, and you can count on the support that you get from them. And there's a loyalty there that is 18 years of loyalty, and that's always going to be the risk. KTM, if you look at the way they've done their other programs, they get in and they kind of stay in and they're involved, and I think, but they're also not anywhere near the size of company and things. And
do you expect them to close the gap this year?
Well, close the gap to a certain close the gap where Suzuki, close the gap to Suzuki. I think that's going to be dependent on the riders. I think every year obviously the bikes improve, but as long as they keep moving in the right direction and they make the right choices to improve, but it's also dependent on the riders.
Is it the right lineup with Kallio obviously in the wings? And
I think they've got a good lineup for where they're at the moment. I mean, obviously Bradley Smith has struggled with the Michelins. He had a tough season last year, injuries and so on, but he was actually already kind of in quite a bit of trouble the year before with the Michelins. Obviously the last season on Bridgestones, where did he finish? 5th or something? I mean, he had an amazing season. Obviously, wow. But that's just one of the things we keep talking about. You change something, some riders can deal with it, other riders can't. And, maybe he'll get the hang of them this year. But I think for where they are now, they need to get the bike better this year, close the gap a bit, and then that will attract, and then they'll need to put a big amount of money on the table, and that'll attract a winner, who knows who. But the problem is when you're behind, like KTM and Suzuki and Aprilia are, they're like, wow, we found a second over the winter, but so is everyone else.
So is everybody else. Exactly.
So wow, you've got to keep improving to catch the people at the lead in the front. Honda, Yamaha, Ducati. You've got to be improving at a faster rate than the best factories out there with the most money and the best riders. That's not easy.
No, and the most difficult thing is not just the pace. The thing that the factories do so well is give the riders something that they can utilize over a longer distance, which is what's so frustrating for Valentino with the Yamaha, is he didn't, and it was, again, it's exactly what everybody who's ever come along and won on a Honda, and you learn once you get to that levels, you're always working toward that. You're making something as rideable as possible for the long haul. And I think, talking about KTM Matt's right, is that they need to make a big jump, but they also going to have to, focus on the racing. The riders are in their mindset, and I think Bradley's in that too, and because of necessity, is it's all about development. It's all about testing, and when you get in that mindset a little bit, your racing craft suffers. Where you can't focus on the race, what you need to do. You're kind of out there paying attention to this all the time, and you're not really figuring out where that edge is. And if he's struggling with feedback, or that comfort level with the tires, the inconsistency that we know is the issue with the Michelins, with everyone, he's going to suffer even worse because of it.
Now, before we switch back to Ducati and the rest of the team, we've just got a quick mention for Mercedes, our sponsor. It's just started snowing very heavily here today, so this might be quite useful. You can get a 4x4 driving experience on the Mercedes-Benz World website, which Alan arrived today in a 4x4, not his smart car, which is probably a good decision. All you need to do is book on 0370 400 4000 and you quote G-Class Ultimate 4x4 and you'll be able to drive a 4x4 around Mercedes-Benz World. And you two have both ridden in snow, haven't you?
Well, yeah, and also at Mercedes World, we've been down there.
Yeah, it's Mercedes World is at Brooklyn, so
yeah, exactly.
People should remember that if you go there, you can walk around. The first purpose-built racetrack in the world ever, and it's pretty spooky to walk up the banking and stuff, which is all kind of falling apart. It's pretty cool, and a fantastic museum there full of the craziest old bikes you've ever seen.
And you rode the first one.
I did. I did ride the first motorcycle. It was the Daimler Benz, and it was like a big. It's wooden. The frame was wooden, and it was.
The wheels were wooden as well.
Yeah, they were, and there wasn't much suspension. Zero actually, but I didn't have any front push problems, so I seemed to. Good feedback, but it was pretty cool. It was at the AMA banquet about 30 years ago.
3 wheels,
huh?
Did you say it was
it was 3 wheels. It was like a big tricycle.
So that's 3 wheels. This one's
with a motor.
So this 4x4 experience, plenty of suspension.
Yeah, plenty of suspension. Exactly.
What more?
If you go down to Brooklyn, so you can see the people charging up and down through the mud and so on in their Mercedes. It's quite funny.
And the expiry date of that deal is 1 year from date of purchase. So that again is 0370 400 4000, quote G-Class Ultimate Experience, Ultimate 4x4 to find out more. So, Ducati. Is Lorenzo going to beat Dovi? That's a question asked by most people on the website, I think.
Well, we were just talking about, fastest at Sepang, 16th at Chang. I think Jorge will win races this year. Whether he will be as consistent as Dovizioso, I don't know. I kind of doubt it.
I think that it all depends on when he gets that first win. If he can get it early and get some confidence and not be so focused on what the bike is not doing, maybe it should be different. You would think it'd be different even if you just base it on what he did in the past, in the way that the seasons would kind of go if he got going and there was that certain confidence level. One of the things that I think is very fascinating about the Ducati is look at the wide range of riders who ride the bikes. You look at Jack Miller. Now, certainly he's extra motivated. Maybe, you could put it off to that because, he jumped right into the Honda thing, probably thinking that one day he would end up like Mick, doing in Wayne Garden and be on the factory Honda team. It didn't go that way for whatever reasons, all the reasons that you can come up with. But he gets on the Ducati and he's fast right away, and it's not even the obviously the latest one, but we kind of see that there is a certain flexibility again that seems to happen with people that ride in the Ducati. So I think that overall the Ducati seems to be moving, I think, in the right direction, but I would think there'd be somewhat of a similarity between the approaches of Dovizioso and Jorge, and just they're not really aggressive riders. I mean, Dovi a little bit more maybe than Jorge, but I think that there's a lot of potential there, and if Jorge gets it going, as we saw in Spain, where we see those guys up front, who knows? That, and if that happens and it happens early, that could spell trouble for everyone else. Actually,
mentally last year, Dovizioso had no pressure, especially at the beginning of the season.
I think all these guys have pressure.
But this year, having such a good season.
I'm not sure that'll affect him. I don't think he's that kind of rider that'll be affected by it. He's a real thinking rider. He's never been a kind of crazy guy. And what we were talking about earlier, just his attitude, if there's a problem, he just sits down and works his way through it. He doesn't throw his toys out the pram. Silverstone last year in qualifying, I think Lorenzo had an electrical problem with one of his bikes and came back into the pits to get on his spare bike, and it didn't have the right front tire on it or whatever, but there was no way they were expecting to use it. Maybe they should have had, and he was kind of shouting at Gabarini and waving his hands around, and again, it's like seeing Maverick walking into the, you just think, well, and I think that's why Jorge's done this kind of his meditation and everything, because I think he realizes that he needs to kind of try and calm himself down. But to put in a full season on a bike that's not kind of perfection like the Yamaha was for him, that's not going to be easy for him. And I think Dovizioso's style, sort of mentally and technique-wise, is more adaptable. I think his style is kind of a bit of a mixture of different styles. He can do a bit of everything, whereas Jorge is very much he's another Max Biaggi. He's got one way of going fast, and when he does it, he's unbeatable.
Yeah.
I mean, 2016, he won 7 races. He won every one of those races from the first corner. Was not overtaken once.
Right.
Exactly. So wow, not many people can do that. But that's a special talent. But he needs to have other talents as well.
And I think too with Dovizioso, as we saw that last year, and we alluded to it in the podcast and our talks about a real change in his mindset. And I think it goes back to kind of what I was saying earlier, is a belief, that he kind of believed once he was in that position, the 2 races he had with Marc, those were just like at the end were perfect decisions he made. The way he sucked Marc into both those situations were perfectly executed. Yeah. And that takes a rider that is thinking ahead of what's happening and knows exactly what he wants to do and executes it. Now, there's a simplicity to that you can't imagine when you're doing it. The key is getting yourself in that position and then having the coolness and the ability to do it. And he's attributed to that, to what he's done off the track and kind of his mindset and belief and things. And as you said, though, is that now he's in the position where it's expected. But I think with his experience and age, he's going to be fine.
I think he's got the kind of mindset that it'll actually help him.
I do too.
And I think his mindset obviously changed last year, but I think the kind of psychological improvement comes with the bike improvement, doesn't it? You think, right, the bike is now ready. Yeah. It kind of never really was before. But it was getting better and better and better and better. And last year it was finally there, and he knew it, and now I'm going to, he's the kind of guy that if the bike wasn't right, he was never going to push it till he fell off and hurt himself. Yeah. And as soon as it was right, off he went. And that was my favorite moment of last year, Red Bull Ring. I mean, so many other riders would have known that Marc was coming up the inside and would have slammed the door on him.
Yeah.
And what would have happened then? Marc would have run into them and popped them up, and they would have run off track, and Marc would have won the race. Yeah. And Dovizioso just knew exactly what to do. It was just poetry. It was just poetry.
It was beautiful. And again, when it's, I always said when people say about watching someone ride, they'll say that guy, he looks so easy. I go, you have no idea how hard it is to make it look that easy. And that's what was beautiful about that. You could see it, and it was the perfect way to deal with the situation. And it's knowing your competition, but again, is executing it. And that's what I think he does better today. If you were to go back, let's say, and look at a race when he was with HRC and the part of the three-rider team, is he had speed but not consistency, and nowhere near what he is able to do today. And that happens. And that's why I think that more than likely he's going to be just fine, is he's kind of, molded into this really, really good rider that thinks properly, prepares. Yeah, exactly. He wants to be there. This is his time. And he's also, because he's struggled, no one appreciates it more.
And also, although we're talking about him now, no one really talks about him. Everybody's talking about Jorge and blah, 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 and Marc and Rossi, and, he's barely been talked about over the winter tests. Yeah. Barely anybody has mentioned him because he's just there or thereabouts, and he doesn't care about being fastest. Well, some riders care about being fastest, some people, some don't. And he's one of those guys who just keeps chipping away.
Absolutely.
Thinking. Yeah. And obviously last year with his engineer, whose name I've forgotten, his crew chief, they're just very good at just chipping away at it. And that's what you got to do with the electronics and tires as they are. You just have to, it's just one problem after the other, and you just have to fix them as you go through,
Yeah. Will Miller have the belief also, now that he knows he's got a bike, can he get another victory on that Ducati?
Well, I think in Jack's case, the only thing we have to go on so far is how each test session he's been there. But as Matt pointed out earlier, testing is one thing, race days are other, because of everybody's effort level changes instead of just a few people. And so we'll see. So far, it's been a great change, and I think that's partially, I think, due to Jack, and him kind of realizing, okay, this is, but I also think, again, riders, certain tracks fit certain bikes fit certain riders, and maybe in Jack's case, this is going to be the thing that he needs, and we'll see, because again, one lap is one thing, a few laps is even a little bit better, but 30 laps is completely different.
And on the Ducati suiting certain circuits, 1,500 quid, another commenter said, is it the riders or the bikes is the reason that Ducati struggles at counterclockwise tracks? And another question, quickly, just to touch on, because we could talk for hours on it, is would Marquez win a title on a Ducati?
Yeah, I think Marquez could win a title on any factory bike, to be honest. Yeah, no doubt about that.
So. And satellite bike? Satellite Ducati?
As we said earlier, that's becoming more and more a possibility. And if he was on a satellite bike with the right crew behind him and the right, I don't see why not, actually. Yeah, because, like we said earlier, 10, 20 years ago, wouldn't have happened. Now, it could.
And I think, too, is in Marc's case, we can talk about, hey, he had 27 crashes last year, I think, 27. I mean, 20
At races.
Yeah.
Plus testing. We don't know how many times he fell off in testing.
I mean, 27 crashes. I mean, that is obviously an unbelievable amount of times to hit the ground, and he's never affected by once, he just walks back in the garage, get on the bike and go. That I completely understand. What is the thing that you that you have to be concerned about is the fact of getting hurt, and it's everything's kind of gone his way in that respect, as Matt said earlier. So the issue would be is if he changed that environment and he went and got on not only a different brand but a completely different effort, is that level of belief, would that be affected? And I've always said that the main thing that happens between a rider that makes the right decision and doesn't is hesitation. And that actually can get you hurt too, is the fact of in that situation, and you hesitate. And I think there is something to the fact of, as we talked earlier about him being in good shape. He's relaxed. He crashes. He kind of doesn't think about getting hurt. I don't, he doesn't seem to really be too concerned about that. So there's a lot more issues than just, my point is whether the bike would be up to a certain level. As I think in Marc's case, there's even more to it,
Yep. And the circuit-specific Ducatis? Is it all bike?
I'm just trying to think. I was trying to think of the anti-clockwise circuits. And, I'd need to look at the results to kind of work that one out. But I think it's more a case of circuits that are particularly asymmetric, where you get a track where you've only got a couple of right-handers on it. So the one side of the tires doesn't get warm or whatever. I think that can affect some bikes more than others, and also some riders more than others. But the Ducati, last year, pretty much. Yeah, no, I'm thinking back now. Brain's going that Dovizioso did always struggle at left-hand circuits, and I've not got an answer for that right now. No.
Yeah, I think there's always a possibility that a bike likes to go one direction. I can think of a couple of bikes that I had, but they were ones Irv built, actually. Irv Kanemoto, that he built, that T751 said it was an issue going to the left. But that was actually something in the actual geometry of the bike and the manufacturing of the frame. I think it has to do, and if you look at Jorge, his case, is him being able to run a soft enough tire so he can run the corner speed. If the higher speed circuits, I think, are for him, when he has to go to a harder tire, he struggles, Other than that, I don't think that there's as much maybe reading into it as you might think.
I mean, there is one thing that Marc loves going left. He does dirt track all the time, so he actually, most riders, most racetracks in Europe are clockwise, so I think most riders feel happy going around right-handers because they're more used to it. But Marc is much prefers left-handers, but he's still pretty good around right-handers. Yeah. So when you get to an anti-clockwise circuit, it's pretty hard to stick with Marc, and maybe that probably makes everybody else look like they're struggling, and it's actually not that, but it's just Marc being faster. Yeah.
Right. Let's rattle through the rest of the grid. Suzuki.
They're in that situation we mentioned. They need to improve. If they find a second, they'll be delighted. But they need to improve at a faster rate than Honda, and that is really hard. But I mean, a great bike. Last year they had a bit of a disaster. Rins was injured a lot of the time. Iannone, he's. I mean, I love Iannone. He's. I really enjoy kind of talking to him, and because he is so unusual. He's this kind of gangster boy, and he gets very angry if you kind of if you're interviewing him and you kind of, he doesn't usually give very good answers, so you have to kind of chip away to kind of try and get to where you want to be, and he just gets really, really angry and starts giving you real heavy looks and stuff. But yeah, I think his obviously his sort of mentality kind of struggled last year. He obviously went very well on the Ducati, and he really struggled in every way. He struggled with the front, he struggled with the rear, and does he have the kind of steady, calm mentality to approach problems in the right way and so on? I'm not sure. And also his crew chief came from Ducati last year. They had a rookie, so that Suzuki garage was that was a real. I think they made a mistake doing that, but who knows? This year they might come good, and I think Rins seems to be really good. He's just chipping away at it, and I'd like to see Iannone go well because I want him in there. I want him on the grid on a half decent bike because I think MotoGP is very lucky at the moment. We've got such a kind of rainbow of characters. That you've got every type of human being is there pretty much, and that's pretty cool. Sorry, Freddie.
No, I agree. I think that his disposition really is doesn't really, I don't think, lead well or bode well for development, because you struggle most of the time. You struggle more, and you have to be able to make good decisions and unemotional decisions. And he seems to, or the hope I think is he had the ability, and because he was a race winner, and then that he could adapt. And so we'll have to see this year. They seem to, the testing, we know that they talked about they went the wrong way in the engine. So we'll see if the engine performance and talking about engine performance, and this is the thing that I think that could be one of the most difficult things for the riders on a bike that you have to ride hard to be able to get the performance, is that the tire inconsistency. And inconsistency it doesn't mean a problem as far as Michelin making the tire. They're great, but it could be that the feedback that the riders are getting, or that the front's giving or the rear's giving, and the fact that they're always bringing new tires, it's always changing, and so you're up against having to ride a bike to its limit and maybe a little bit more than it's, and so that's when a rider is really dependent on what the tire gives them, and to be able to trust it. Someone like Ione, I think, struggles with that. You can see it the way that I watch him, and I watch the way that, he just goes from lap to lap to, it's just, there's an inconsistency there that I think gets magnified because of all the other things, whether last year's the engine performance was not what they hoped, and then they're inconsistent, and he needs to ride it to a certain level, and then of course the tire performance doesn't help with that, and again it goes back to a rider's ability to be able to mentally deal with that and to be able to work around it, and that's what you see someone that Marc does so much better than everyone else.
Davor Stimac asks if they can challenge for wins this year, Suzuki.
Well, I'll just say briefly, I think that if they do, it's going to be in adverse conditions, where you get somewhere, and that's just my feeling, is that anything's possible now in MotoGP, and we saw that 2 years ago, 9 different winners, and last year obviously it was a lot less. I think the factory bot guys adjusted a little better just to the situations and stuff. So you saw that come back a season more back to normal, even in the different conditions. But if we have tough weather conditions, absolutely.
Yeah, I think they'd be doing very well to get on a podium in the dry. I think they kind of lost a year last year, and everybody else kept on moving forward. So and Rins is obviously just getting better and better, but they don't have a kind of a Marquez or a Dovizioso or a Rossi, at the moment. So, they're developing a bike, and they haven't got the best riders. So I don't see them winning a race. But I would love to be proved wrong, because the more factories the merrier, and it's a you look at that bike, and with the carbon fiber engine hangers and stuff, and it's just a really nice, sweet, clever little bike, and it would be good to see it.
It's good for them, exactly, and they, that's what hurt them before coming in and out a little bit. They're not obviously the biggest of the Japanese factories, and so budget's always consideration. But I think if they can, what really was good for them was Maverick, and it's too bad they lost Maverick. It would have been interesting to see, him staying with them, and I think that would have been the best situation for Suzuki without question, but that's not the case. So you have to adapt, and we'll see. And Rins, he seems to, put in. It's like you said, he's certainly getting better, and if he can stay healthy, and we'll see where he goes.
Does that mean that they could, if Rins does perform better, then that makes Suzuki's job easier with Iannone? Michael Dolan asks, how should they deal with the underperforming Iannone? And all the Instagram hits in the world won't give him so much as 1,000th of extra lap time.
Well, he had a 2-year contract, and this is the second year, so he knows that he's got to step up. maybe that'll make the difference. You know, I think he's quite an emotional rider, rides a lot of emotion, and you know, losing all that money for 2019, if he loses his ride, that's quite a big emotional kick up the backside. And you know, who knows, he might turn it around. That, you know, if Suzuki, they've got the engine better and the chassis better, you know, they made a big step at the end of last year. You look at their results, suddenly got a lot better after Aragon. They tested at Aragon, they tested a new chassis, they tested you know, new solutions to the electronics, and they tested a new engine with different crankshaft inertia, which made a big difference, but obviously they couldn't use that in the races because they weren't allowed to. So, you know, I think they're going to make a step up, but is it going to be enough? And there's not much you can do to make a rider perform better, except saying, you know, if you want to ride next year, you need to go faster. And you can't really get in there. Well, I mean, you can make him a rider better or worse, I suppose, but really it all has to come from inside, you know. And he knows he's under pressure now, and that sometimes can be good, sometimes can be bad. He's got to step up, otherwise he's going to be out of a job.
Yeah, and the thing is that we with someone like Annoni, is that when he won at Ducati, when he was part of the team and they chose him, you would think that's the best situation he's going to be in. You know, that's the most confidence he's going to have and the most support he feels. And an emotional rider like him, that is a very important thing. And we'll see with Ren's doing better that, you know, a Japanese tendency is, or a team tendency, is the support is going to start going toward who's performing the best. Because at the end of the day, that's what the riders, you know, obviously getting paid to do. And you can support them, but it's not up to them to make him perform. It's up to him.
Yep. We've still got 2 pages of questions left here. So what we might do is hold these for your post-testing podcast, which the Rider Insights. So make sure you subscribe to make sure you'll get those into your podcast program. But let's go back to maybe Aprilia and the rookies. Morbidelli, maybe. Who's going to stand out for you guys coming through?
Again, going on testing, Nakagami has been amazing. And, you know, we saw that with Folger last year. You know, you're riding in Moto 2, and Moto 2, you know, it's based around a road bike engine. So it's not a full prototype and no electronics. So you're getting off a bike that's kind of not a full, it's kind of midway between a super sport bike and a Grand Prix bike. And then you get on to the mostest of a Grand Prix bike, and it's got carbon brakes, it's got electronics, it's just designed just to do one thing. And all those electronics are designed to help you, not to make your life easier, but to help you go faster. So everything is designed for perfection. And I think a lot of guys, they get off a Moto 2 bike where they're having to ride around. It's kind of the fact that it's not a full Grand Prix bike, and they get onto a MotoGP bike and they're like, wow, this does everything I want it to do. And I think we do see that now. We saw it even with 250s. You know, when Lorenzo got off the Aprilia 250 and got on the Yamaha, he said it was easier to ride, you know, because it's heavier, it's softer, it's got 4-stroke power, it's easier to ride. So I think Nakagami might be doing what Folger did, you know, finding it easier to ride, and Morbidelli as well. They would be my 2 standouts. Yeah, I think Nakagami for sure, to me, is the surprise. And there are certain situations and where you look for that in a rider, is if they get on a bike with more power, they either like that or they don't, you know, and they can deal with that and adapt to it. And because it does everything faster, but I think that when you see someone that has the ability of a Morbidelli, and you can kind of see that in his riding, I think he's going to do really well. And the key for the most difficult, it seems to be the most difficult thing for riders come from Moto 2, and probably the bike that takes the most adjust would be the Honda. You know, it has the narrowest, you know, kind of window a little bit. I know the M1, the engine characteristics on the Yamaha, the crossplane, it's a little smoother, and the Ducati seems to be also a bike that is easier to maybe a little bit to adapt to. So I think that Morbidelli and Nakagami, they not only have the
to make that leap, but also they're in a situation to where if they can do that right away, that really bodes well for their future, I think.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, they have to just take it one step at a time, and you always tell young racers that sort of coming up, just, there's no hurry, man. You've got to, you just keep learning one step at a time. But when you're 23, 24, 25, and you're a racer, that the whole point is not waiting. It's getting where you want to go.
Yeah.
As fast as possible, and I think they're both pretty clever guys.
Yeah.
They've got good people around them.
A lot of experience.
They just need to just chip away, because if you don't do that on a MotoGP bike, unless you're Marc Marquez, you're going to have some big crashes. So they need to just kind of just like plan out their season really, and just where they want to be one by one, and just keep getting better and better and better till by the end of the year they're kind of up there,
Yes, and also the teams tell you, you can do that, and then of course they want you to perform too, So it's also
a double-edged sword, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly.
Just take your time.
Take your time, but you're about 3/10 slow, and if you could pick that up just a little bit, we'd appreciate it, So, but no, it's I think it's certainly it's a great time for the championship because of the level of the equipment, and I think that's what we're seeing too. You're seeing the Nakagami, you're seeing the Morbidelli, and you're seeing the performance, and from Honda's standpoint, they would benefit in the satellite teams being closer to what the factories are using for their program too, I think we're maybe seeing that a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think. The fact that all the bikes have to be pretty much identical now.
Exactly.
The satellite bikes and that helps everyone.
Absolutely.
They can't just build a special for Marquez. They've got to actually make it work for everyone, and that obviously helps the rookies. And I think HRC will be delighted to have a Japanese guy, not only because that's good for publicity at home and everything, which is obviously important to them, but also so they can communicate to somebody in their own language. Remember speaking to Rossi after he sacked Jeremy Burgess. He reckoned there was probably a 5% that he didn't understand with Jeremy Burgess when he was talking with him. And we're talking percentages earlier about, 0.5% makes a difference between winning and finishing 4th or 5th. So, if you're missing 5% in that, in your debriefs of somebody says something and you don't quite understand what they mean, or they aren't able to speak in their second language to get their point across fully, that can have that can be a problem. So I think for HRC to have somebody they can sit down and talk to, I think that's a big boost for them.
Cal benefit to have a teammate? Did it benefit you having teammates? Or
yeah, well, I don't think so much with Cal, because Cal's program is, it can be a benefit workload-wise. It can be a benefit if you're struggling. That's where I think it's, again, a double-edged sword with Valentino and Maverick, where they're both struggling with the same thing. It certainly helps in moving maybe the issue along, that it's really something we need to get addressed. It's not just something that a rider can adapt to because you got two guys struggling with it. So from that standpoint, it certainly can be a benefit. And I think if they're testing some, but specifically with Cal is more concerned with what he does with the factory. He does testing things, his relationship, his whole, obviously what was so important to him was in this last contract where it's an HRC, it's a Honda deal, and again that comes because he is, he obviously is out there to do the best he can. He wants to win races, but it's also he's a support for the factory team, and maybe even specifically Marc in that respect.
Okay, I think that we have maybe run out of time now, unfortunately. Like I said, if you list, we'll give Freddie these questions for his next podcast, which is the Rider Insight, which will be post-testing, post-Qatar.
Absolutely. After Qatar test, and I'm going to do one to kind of wrap up what we've seen in testing and some of these questions.
There's one for Matt, really, which is Spencer versus Doohan versus Rossi versus Stoner versus Marquez.
The impossible question.
How would you rate them?
Well, Freddie the greatest, obviously.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, thanks, man.
That's the ideal way to
who are we looking at?
We have
I'll buy you a coffee.
Spencer Doohan, Rossi, Stoner, Marquez.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's just the kind of, it's impossible. And I'm not being polite. It's just impossible. I mean, you know, that they're all on that higher plane, and I'd put Roberts in there as well. Who else would I have in there? Spencer, Doohan, Rossi, Stone, and Marquez. I'd certainly have Roberts in there, Rainey, Schwantz. There's probably about 10 riders that I just can't really say. And you know, you'd even have to look at Surtees and people like that. You know, you can't, it's just impossible to compare, really is. Just, I mean, it's if you want to have another hour podcast comparing the top 10 greatest riders in the world, then we can do it. But I mean, you know, at the end you come up with saying, well, I don't really know.
Okay, but we do know that Marquez is going to win the title. That's what we've decided, isn't it?
Possibly.
But but because and it's a great thing about motorsports. There's so many variables that figure into it, and we talked about that. Is maybe, you know, he needs to avoid another 27, you know, crash season. I mean, for many reasons, and just the amount, because as we know, everything has its limit, and you know, so but. I think he's going to win it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll be back in December probably to look back, probably with more snow. So, Matt, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Freddie, thanks. And thanks to Al for being behind the desk. We'll be back very soon, actually, with another podcast looking at Formula One. So do subscribe. So, yeah, we'll see you then.
Hey, Jack, I've got new ones.
You look really grown up. Very smart, Jack.
Is that your sister's?
Can I have that? Jack?
I like the way you work it. No diggity. I got to bag it up. I like the way you